Hello again, and welcome to the Hoosier Football Tailgate here on the Believe Network. I thank you for joining me tonight. It is Ohio State Buckeye week as we head into a game week once again, having been in a bye the last few days. I know that Coach Cignetti felt they did get a lot of things accomplished from just the sense of being able to refresh and get some guys' legs back underneath them. As we had talked before in that Michigan game, I felt there was a lot of guys that had heavy legs in that ball game that kind of came into fruition in the second half. But we'll talk a little bit about that. Going to be joined by Dylan Sinn from the Journal-Gazette here in Fort Wayne to get his insight as a writer, as an AP voter, as well as other teams such as Notre Dame, and kind of how he compares the two. We'll talk a little bit with Dylan as well, and we'll get into some of the things that with this Indiana team that is going to happen this week as it pertains to the big noon kickoff and college game day and the Big Ten. Pre-game shows will all be in Columbus this Saturday. Noon kickoff again for the game of the week, if not in some respects, the nation, as many people will be arriving to watch that football game in Buckeye land. But I'm sure that it's going to be highly watched on television systems all over the country. And I think that's going to be something that is really going to be a classic ball game. And for Indiana, it's something that they haven't been in or involved with in a long time when it comes to playing for what would be a chance to go and play in the Big Ten championship game. First, I want to talk a little bit about Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting software platform and your number one source for all things sports betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, not to forget also the NHL and UFC and MMA. Head over to BetOnline today and get in on all the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. And thank you for their affiliation with us here at the Hoosier Football Tailgate, as well as those that also are associated with the Hoosier Football Tailgate. You can get that information on our Instagram or X bio feed with the link tree. And if you happen to do something, buy something from one of our affiliates, thank you in advance, but we also will receive some sort of a commission for that sale. But again, the big noon kickoff and college game day and the Big Ten conference game day all will be in Columbus this week for Indiana and Ohio State. We will also point out that right now, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana are all in the top 5 teams in the country in both AP and the coaches poll, as well as Oregon and Indiana are the only 2 Big Ten teams that are undefeated at this moment. One thing I will do later on, if we have time, I can pull up the college football playoff predictor and kind of go through some scenarios and how it may impact Indiana, so forth and so on. We may have time to do that. If we got time, we'll do it tonight. But with Ohio State also being a 11-point favorite over Indiana, it's kind of hard to believe that Indiana would be an 11-point dog to Ohio State. I understand it, but I would understand more so if it was more of a 7 to 8 point spread, considering Indiana, Ohio State statistically are pretty much 1-2 behind each other. Either one's ahead in one category and the other one's right behind them, and vice versa. And you've got Indiana's defense right now. Their run defense is the number one ranked defense in the Big Ten and the nation. So it's going to pit a very mighty Ohio State running attack with Will Howard at the helm, who also can be a running quarterback. He is a good 200-pound plus running back, as well as the quarterback for the Buckeyes, as well as other guys in the perimeter that are pretty special as well. We'll talk about all that when we get to our Thursday broadcast and see where we're all from that perspective. Remember, if you're in one of the comment sections of any app, whether it's YouTube, could be X or Facebook, by all means, we'd love for you to participate. Add any questions that you may have or anything that you think is of relevant material, especially when Dylan comes on. I'm sure he wouldn't mind answering a few questions from his perspective. We'll share that with the group, have a talk and a debate maybe in that regard, but we'll see what all happens with that as we go. But please, the more you guys interact, the better it is when we do these lives, because it at least spurns some conversation with some things as well. And we'll wait till when Dylan gets on here, we'll get everything orchestrated in that manner once he arrives. Other thing talk about as well as, I think it's good time to potentially reflect as well. How did Indiana get to this point where they're 10-0? It's one of those things that in some respects, I think we all thought Indiana at the beginning of the year, having 8 home games, there was a path for them to get to that 6-win mark within a period of time that would give them a chance to set their sights on bigger and better things. Or like me, I thought a realistic goal was 8 wins, and 7 wins would not be anything to laugh about. But Indiana is a 10-0 football team that is ranked number 5 in the country, and has a chance Saturday to win at Ohio State and be the representative in the Big Ten championship game against Oregon, which would be a monumental feat in that regard. Other thing of topic news of late too is that Kurt Cignetti has inked a new contract that happened over the weekend. It was something that I had said, I think earlier, that behind the scenes, Scott Dolson was working towards that. What that all was going to involve, I did not know at the time, but there was enough chatter in the background to say that was something that was being worked on. I think with the idea with some potential jobs coming open, and some of those being what we would call big time name jobs. I think Scott Dolson and Pam Winton wanted to make sure that Sig knew that he was very much appreciated here at Indiana, and he ended up signing a 8-year contract extension, I guess you could say, and a pretty significant raise in his money to take home. But I also think he was able to increase some of the assistant coaches' salaries as well, and that made it a chance to them getting their him locked in and loaded for years and years to come. He very well deserved that type of contract as well. I know some people would say, why would you do it now? Even from a coach's perspective, wait and see what happens this week and so forth and so on. But that's not Sig. I mean, I think we all can agree that Sig is a pretty down-to-earth individual. When things seem to be the right thing to do, he's the first one to jump, signified that he wanted to get it out of the way and wanted to put himself in a situation that gave him a chance to do that. I'm going to try to bring in Mr. Dylan Sinn. Let's see if I can make this work right. Maybe not. Okay, Dylan, let's see what I can do here for you. I think you're in behind me, but we're going to try to do something here. Okay. Let's see if I can find the correct. There we go. There's that. Hopefully I can get you in here real quick. I can see you. I can see you back there, but you're too big.
Okay.
Hey man, me and see, it took a little bit of work on my part to get this thing accomplished. So you just got to give me time, and I usually get her done. But don't laugh at me, okay? Dylan Sinn joining us right now from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. Dylan covers the Indiana Hoosiers as well as other college teams that I talked about earlier, and perhaps we'll have a chance to tap into some of that knowledge, because I think we're at a point in time, Dylan, where you've seen enough to probably contrast Indiana with other teams in the country, or mostly up in South Bend per se. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it would be. Obviously the team up in South Bend is pretty darn good. I've seen them. I saw them this week take on Virginia. Won that game 35-14. It wasn't really as close as the final score. Basically, since that loss to Northern Illinois, Notre Dame's kind of done exactly what IU has done, which is beat everyone in their path. And even though the strength of schedule isn't particularly good, they've beaten everyone soundly, and so I think that counts for something. I said earlier in the season that I think IU would win a matchup between those teams. I still believe that. It's a lot closer than it was in October. I think Notre Dame has gotten better as the season's gone on. I think IU kind of came into the season as more of a product, and they were already good. I think Notre Dame has kind of taken a little bit to get there, but they're there now, and so I think a matchup between those teams is really fun. But I think IU the edge because of how balanced they.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of things that Indiana has shown over the 10-week schedule that lends itself to making some, I guess, assumptions in some respects. They got the number one rush defense in the country, and some other categories. They're kind of in that. It was whoever was in front of the other one, the other team was right behind them. So if Ohio State was ahead of Indiana in something, they were like back to back. So, you kind of get this mindset that Saturday's game could be a dandy of a football game, considering where they're all at in terms of statistical stuff, black and white. Again, it doesn't mean that one team over the other is going to win because they're close to each other. You still got to play the game, but I think it adds an interesting dynamic to Saturday. Let's talk about what your thoughts are in Indiana. Here they are at 10-0. Prior to the season, I had said, 8 wins would be a realistic shot. They would probably make 6 with some ease in some respects because of the way their schedule played out. It's going to be one of those things that let's see what Indiana has to be more stout up front. Ohio State will try to ravage that O-line after studying the Michigan tape. Oh, that's a fair assessment there, Tim, about that, and we'll can talk about that. But again, they're at 10-0. I don't think anybody could rightfully say they saw this coming for Indiana. I think most would say 8 wins and 7 wins would still not be something to laugh about. I mean, get your take on Indiana, where they're at, kind of where you saw them at the beginning of the year, and kind of give us the assessment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was on record that I thought IU would be much improved. My prediction before the season was 7-6. Like I thought they were the problem I had with their schedule before the season was there were winnable games, but a lot of the winnable games were on the road. Games like Northwestern and Michigan State, I thought would be much tougher than they were, and they were not. I thought Nebraska than they were, and they were not. So schedule here than before the season, but part of it is just that IU was better from the outset than I thought they were. Players they brought in being ready to go. I think it's a credit to the coaching staff having the team at the start of the season. I think that would work in progress, play better at the end. Of the season. But they were really, really good from the. I was impressed by that, and I don't think anyone saw this coming. I think it's beyond most optimistic kind of assessment of where they were. And what is that it hasn't been done with smoke. I spent the last several kind of contrasting what they've done, like who is also going last weekend undefeated. But they had kind of won a bunch of close games, scraped by, and it wasn't really as impressive. But I was, and then you see they go out and win games with the six Kansas team because they've been playing with fire the entire season. IU hasn't done that. They've been really good almost throughout the season. They had kind of one minor scare Michigan, maybe one or two plays in the first half, actually turning into a little bit of a blowout itself. Um, so I think that what IU's done is really, really impressive and up there with the most impressive resumes in the country.
Yeah, and I know we're getting some choppiness on the audio aspect of it. Hopefully, it'll clear up some as we kind of go here. But yeah, I think you're correct in talking about the way Indiana's won. I think last Saturday against Michigan was the first game that they didn't cover the spread. Now, most games, Vegas had them no more than a 7.5 point favorite. They got tired of paying out money, so they made them a 15-point favorite against Michigan the last Saturday. So, like you said, they've done it in a way that's been overly convincing and has had a chance to really not be tested to the extent that they were against Michigan, which was a good thing from the standpoint every team needs one of those games. Ohio State kind of had that game at Penn State a couple weeks ago where they were battling with them. It's going to be an interesting dynamic from that standpoint as well. IU needs to watch Ohio State versus Penn State. Penn State went into a shell after the 10-0 lead. Take chances. I don't think you'll have to worry about that with Coach Cignetti. He's a guy that likes to keep the gas pedal at full throttle. He never kind of lets up on it from that perspective, but we shall see. And hopefully that's something that Indiana has to worry about, not being up on Ohio State and not going into some type of conservative shell because Penn State found out that if you don't score inside the 5 yard line when they had it down there twice, chances are you're not going to win a game. And that was the thing about that ball game. And I don't know if you watched it, Dylan, but Penn State, the reality of it was, had they scored the 2 times that they had the ball inside the 5 yard line, it may be a different story right now.
No, I watched that entire. I thought Penn State played well enough to win, and just didn't get it done in crunch time. Um, Obviously, IU has had some trouble uh, in the red zone. Not in the red zone. They've actually been really, really in the red zone. One of the best. They've been really good at getting touchdowns. Zone. They don't settle for field goals. They've gone for it on fourth down a lot, and I think that's why you can be a little bit optimistic about what Eddie has is because they've been kind of tested for this in the entire season in terms of maximizing possessions. They've been really aggressive on fourth down, fourth touchdowns on drives that other teams field goals. The only problem is they had some trouble in goal line offense. Not a ton of it, but there are some red flags about that against Michigan. We'll have to see what they have something up after the bye week. You're going to need touchdowns if you get down inside the 5 yard line. Field goals are not, and I think that goes back to what comment there saying about the IU offensive line, where they good in this game against Ohio. I think part of the problem against Michigan was that they had Drew Evans lost the season, their left guard lost the season just before that game, a couple of days before that game, Achilles correct. So they had a first time starter Tyler out there for the game against Michigan. I think that having to get ready to go and kind of incorporate there, I think will help just make it a little bit more ready against Ohio State. Generally speaking, offensive line is really good. Obviously, losing is not great. It's not what you want at this point in the season. But all Sun Belt guy for he can play. It's just a question of building that chemistry with the guys. I think they'll have that ready to go.
Yeah, I know that that injury that Evans suffered Thursday in practice, which I'm still trying to figure out how that all happened on a Thursday practice, because that's a freaky injury, one thing. But Steven's kid, I think he's very capable, of playing. And I think you're correct in the sense that the thing that I think the most is that they did not have that cohesiveness like they had in previous weeks. The other thing I noticed is I felt they were heavy legged. I thought their offensive line, if you really think about it for the most part, is that they had played every single snap. The five guys on the field had played every single snap of about every game up till this past week. So I felt maybe they got a little heavy legged in that regard. So I think the bye came at a critical time in that respect for them to get some things underneath them heading into this game against Ohio State. I do think the one thing that has stuck out to me, and I'd like to get your take on this, Dylan, is that Indiana has had an average of over 200 yards rushing up till the Michigan State game. Michigan State, they barely had 100 yards. And then last week against Michigan was their lowest output as an offense in 10 weeks. And rushing wise, they only had 40 yards rushing, and they had 41 yards of tackle for losses against. So that one flag, that's a red flag for me, because I don't necessarily think that maybe they have given it much of a chance to develop that running game throughout a game. I know sometimes defense dictate it and things of that nature, but if you can't run the ball consistently in a game and be able to have balance, a team like Ohio State and even Michigan kind of proved it. They were at a point where they pinned their ears back and they were on y'all from the entire second half. I mean, Rourke was getting pressured on about every play. But kind of how have you felt with that offensive component as it pertains to rushing, that 2 weeks in a row they failed to really get close to where they were averaging on the year?
Yeah, I think some truth to that of it being a red flag. I think that the Michigan game was a little bit of an outlier for a couple of first. Michigan has one of the best defensive lines in the entire country. If you're going to struggle against a team, Michigan is the team you'd struggle against with Mason Graham on the interior defensive line. They're really, really good. Those are both NFL guys, potentially pick, right? So you're going to struggle. It's going to be run against them. And I think the other part of that is that they missed Justice Ellison for part of that game.
Yeah.
Ellison was out for part of that game, and you had to go. They've had a really good kind of 1-2 punch this year with Ellison and Tyson Lawton, right? And then Kalon Black getting some carries as well. And I think that losing Ellison for part of that game kind of made Lawton kind of out there by himself. And I think that hurt as well. So I don't know how much stock I put into the game against Michigan or how replicable that is for Ohio State's defense. I think Ohio State could give Indiana some problems in the run game, but I do think that Indiana can also get some business done in kind of a quasi run game, right? Indiana has a really good screen game. You get throws to Miles Rice, throws to Keyshawn Williams, little like kind of tunnel screen type of things that if you're struggling to run between the tackles, those things can be kind of a quasi run game to kind of take some pressure off of your downfield passing game. And I think that you should be able to do some business that way if teams are really trying to pin your ears back. That can get you out into space with some of your more athletic players and get you some yards, kind of in the way a run would if your offensive line is struggling. So I think they'll have some stuff schemed up for that. It wasn't great against Michigan. You're absolutely right. I think that's a problem, but I don't think it's as big of a problem as that really poor stat line suggests.
Yeah, I just those are two things that just kind of stuck out to me the last couple of weeks is that aspect of them not making their average and running the football and losing the balance, which for Indiana is a 60-40 complement to that degree. John wants to know, do we think Sig is sold on Jackson for next year or will he go to the portal again? Um, Here's my take on it. I do think he's sold in Jackson's athletic ability because he is very athletic and he can really spin the football. That's the two things that are in his corner. The one thing I think that affects Taven is all up here. It's all mental for him in terms of decision making and making the right decisions. So um, I do think he'll go in the portal again if you can find that one quarterback like he did with Rourke and see where the chips fall, because I don't think Tyler Cherry or Alberto Mendoza are going to be ready to play in the Big Ten a year from now. That's my thought. Dylan, you want to give your thought on it?
Yeah, I'm much with you, Shannon. I don't know if Tatum has shown quite enough to kind of basically bet the entire 2025 season on him, which is what you'd be doing if you didn't go portal to somebody. Now, it, there are different modes of going in the portal, right? There's a difference between going and getting a proven starter from a G5 school like a Curtis Rourke and expecting him to be the starter from day one. And there's a difference between that and going and getting someone who was also a backup at a different school who you think has some talent and trying to bring him in as someone to compete with Taven, someone who you don't know who's going to be the starter right away, and just seeing where the chips fall. I think they might go with the latter and go with someone who maybe is a rising star or someone who has been a backup somewhere but has talent, and you bring him in, kind of with the assumption that either he or Taven will be good enough to be your starter next year, rather than going and getting another 1 year rental like Rourke, who's been very good but is only going to be with you for 1 year, and then Taven probably transfers, and you have to kind of go in the portal again the following year. So there's different ways to go in the portal. I expect them to get someone out of the portal. I don't know if it's going to be the type of like guaranteed starter that Rourke was.
Yeah, again, it all falls on his premise of potential what production versus potential in his mindset. Tim wants to know, don't we think we need to run? Running needs to be opened up by passing. You're never going to run to establish the run. It needs to be selective through big plays and passing. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I was trying to communicate in that regard. Indiana and how they run the football, and a lot of it rests on Curtis's Rourke's shoulder because a lot of their runs are based on RPOs, run pass option. They very seldom call a run play and just let it eat. More or less, it's coupled with the RPO, and that's why I said, in some cases, the run game this past 2 weeks is maybe it has been because of that scenario that they're calling the run pass option, and it's been more pass than it has been run. personally, I like to see them get back to running the ball with some of their power and counter schemes that they had a lot of success early in the year. And those are type of plays that you can let eat. And what I mean by that, you can let it run into a 6 box or a heavy box because you're blocking down and kicking out. They haven't done that as much here of late. They've done more inside outside zone concepts, and I'm just not big on those type of run plays when you got a team that's getting penetration. Michigan State and not Michigan State, Michigan was getting a lot of penetration against our offensive line, and we just didn't do anything like that. I think that's kind of your same thought process too, as to why maybe the run game hasn't been as successful against Michigan or slightly unsuccessful against Michigan State, Dylan, was the fact that we may have been seeing a lot of RPOs being called as opposed to just straight run plays.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that they've had so much success with RPO passes this year. Like that's been where this offense has really shown is when they do the RPO pass and Rourke pulls it down and fires over the middle. They're as good as anyone in the country at that specific formulation. And so I think what happened against Michigan to a certain extent was that those passes were not quite as successful out of the run pass option. I think Michigan did a pretty good job of covering them over the middle. And so it made the run game a little bit less successful as well because there wasn't the threat of pulling it down and throwing quite as much. And so I do think that a big question for this game against Ohio State is how well does Ohio State cover over the middle? They have one of the better cover guys or one of the more athletic cover guys, I should say, in the country. In Sonny Styles, their safety, he's kind of a jack of all trades. He's very, very good, and I think he is going to be crucial in this game because Indiana is going to try to throw over his head, and Curtis Rourke is going to try some of those layered throws. And if he can get back and defend some of those over the middle, it's going to be tough for Indiana to really get that going. So a lot of this is going to be, hey, can we pick on him or not?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's kind of a legacy game for him at Ohio State, quite frankly, because he's a junior. He was a highly touted recruit. He's been playing much, much better recently. And I think this is a game where a lot of their game plan hinges on it. Can you take advantage of him or not?
Yeah, I agree with you in that. And then Tim followed up with it being a different game. Feels like they need to score 35 points against Ohio State to have a chance to win. I would say that's a pretty good assumption. I think Indiana averaging something like 46 points a game thus far. If they can, get to that point, but Ohio State I think is averaging 42. So if they can get to 30 points or more, I do think they have a chance of winning about any game in that regard. Let's talk a little bit, Dylan, too. You've kind of alluded to Ohio State and in some of their games thus far, as well as a little bit of Oregon, who escaped Wisconsin this past weekend up at Camp Randall. You got to give them credit for that, that win, even though it was a come from behind win. And they barely beat Wisconsin, who was a 4-5 team, I believe. We didn't see him drop in the polls because of it, which I always find fascinating because this is my question. You are an AP voter, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Yeah. And I know you were taking some heat earlier in the year on where you had Indiana relative to everybody else in the country, or at least that's what I picked up from the Twitter world, where everybody has all the answers and there's nobody nobody's right when that happens. But right now, Indiana and Oregon are the only two teams that are undefeated in the top 12. That was a little surprising when I saw it. There are several one-loss teams and just about as many two-loss teams, which is something that is ironic to a degree. Do you think Indiana should be rated higher than the three teams that have one losses?
So I have them fourth in my poll this week. So I have them ahead of Penn State, but I have them behind Ohio State, and I think that is I think that's fair. I think Ohio State is one of the best teams in the country. A road loss by 1 point to Oregon, where they came so close to winning. I think there was time on the clock when Will Howard did at the end of that game. I think they should have had a chance to get a field goal off and win that game. I digress. Um, Texas, I think the one loss to Georgia is at least understandable. I'm a little bit more skeptical of them. You could absolutely make a case for Indiana ahead of Texas just because Texas played so few teams that are really good, but you have the common opponent with Michigan, right? Texas looked a little bit better against Michigan, especially playing Michigan on the road. Indiana had them at home. So I think that's about where I land there. I think you have Indiana down below some lost teams. I think that you've kind of lost the plot a little
Yeah,
bit
right.
with how these rankings are supposed to go. If they lose to Ohio State this week and they lose big, fine. But basically, every advanced metric has them among the best teams. You have them below a two-loss Ole Miss. I just don't know. Ole Miss has lost 2 games to teams like they lost to Kentucky, and they lost to an LSU team that is just not very good, quite frankly. And it, Indiana has won and won convincingly. I know the schedule isn't quite as good, but the way I think about it is if you out a team mediocre, that should count for about as much as beating a team that's pretty good. And so, like Indiana 56-7 win over Nebraska. Yeah, Nebraska's 5. They beat them 56-7. Like
Which Ohio
that's a
State, yeah,
performance.
which
So that's where I end up.
Ohio State had to score late in that game against Nebraska to get a win. And Nebraska's defense held Ohio State to their lowest output offensively on the year, especially rushing. I know that was one thing that kind of caught my attention with everything. The mystery team is Notre Dame. They have one bad loss against Northern Illinois. And yes, I know they got one really good win against Texas A&M, arguably down at Texas. And they're kind of in the same boat Indiana is in some respects because the teams that they've played after Indiana or after Northern Illinois really wouldn't say they're world beaters as it pertains to their schedule. You said they played Virginia this week and they hammered them. They played a Navy team who at the time I know was undefeated, but let's face facts there. You know, they beat Navy. Navy's gone on to lose like three more games after that one. So that game doesn't look as strong, even though they were ranked when they played them. Is the brand name a true thing in the college football rankings? Does the brand matter? You know, with a Notre Dame, a Georgia, an Alabama, in some respects, you could say Ohio State, because these are the teams that most people would relate to being in the national spotlight.
Let's put it this way: it hasn't mattered yet. I think the college football playoff rankings have generally been pretty fair so far. Like you could quibble with them being ahead of Penn State. I think that Penn State has a case. With I think that Indiana should be ahead of them right now, but I don't think that's particularly egregious. Outside of that, I think it's been relatively fair. Now, the question is whether that holds toward the end of the season, right? Because the SEC especially is going to put a public pressure blitz on the committee at the end of the season to say, hey, we deserve 5 or 6 teams in. And it's whether the committee is going to be able in the final, because none of these other rankings matter. It's only the final ranking that has bearing.
It's just a snap in
So
time.
is the committee going to be able to withstand that public pressure from the SEC, which is coming, and be able to objectively evaluate these teams without looking at, well, this is the big bad SEC. And I think they got it wrong last year, putting Alabama in over Florida State. I know that that's unpopular because of what happened with Georgia. I think it had the entire team opt out that game. They got it wrong last year. I trust them. At this point, I have a little bit more faith here, but we'll see. It still remains.
Well, I think the question that's going to come to the SEC, and this is where they're probably going to get on their soapbox, is does a 3-loss Georgia, Tennessee, or even Ole Miss, if it comes to it, do they deserve to be in over any 1-loss or 2-loss team from another conference, whether it's the Big 12, whether it's the ACC? In some cases, is it the Big 10? I know there has been some already that have said, with Indiana, that if they lay an egg at Ohio State and Ohio State beats them not only convincingly but embarrassingly, that they should fall out of the top 12. No, which I think is a crock of shit. Excuse me. When you look at it, I've done the predictors, and right now, every predictor that I've done in giving Indiana the loss to Ohio State still has them firmly in the playoffs. It's a matter of whether they host a game in the first round or go on the road. But what do you think about the 3-loss team? And then I'll let you get out of here.
So the problem with that, they might not have a 3-loss, right? There is a path to Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas ending up with 2 losses, right? So it might come down to a 2-loss SEC team against 11-1 Indy, right? And I think that is where we're going to find. I think that Indiana would deserve to be in. I think the way it might come down if Indiana loses to Ohio State 10 points or so, and everything stays talk in the SEC. I think that it's going to come down to Indiana and Ole Miss for that last playoff spot. The 11th spot, spot goes to the G5 champion, right?
Yeah.
So I think down to 11-1 Indiana versus 10-2 Ole Miss in chalk holes. I think Indiana deserves it over Ole Miss based on. We'll see whether the committee agrees with it. I don't have a ton, but we'll see. I think that's what we're going to have to find.
Yeah, we're going to have to see what it. Tim is a Penn State fan, he says, and wants to see us knock off the Buckeyes. Of course, love to. Neutral observer. Tim, we welcome all and any into the Hoosier Football Tailgate podcast. There is no favoritism in our room, and the bottom line is we're pretty black and white about it. You find that Indiana at this point has been very appreciative of the love that the national media has given them. But kind of like what Sig says, we don't let that get stuck between our ears, because what matters is the next game. And in the game of college football, that's the thing that matters the most is your next game. And that's going to be the thing with Indiana, with Ohio State. And then, Purdue, even though Purdue's is won one ball game this year, the old Oaken bucket, you might as well throw out the records, because there'll be a lot of motivation for Purdue against Indiana in a couple weeks. So anyway, Dylan, I appreciate all your time today. Kind of went a little longer than I told you, but we got your audio back to working correctly. And I thought, man, to have a genius on the show right now is very, very important. So I appreciate it, my man. I know you've got some things probably to write up or do, and I know you've got basketball and football rolling along at this time of year. But thanks for your time, my man.
Absolutely, Griff. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to the weekend.
Yes, sir. Dylan Sinn from the Journal-Gazette joining us here tonight on the Hoosier Football Tailgate. And like I said, I appreciate his coming on this evening, and I have a lot of respect for Dylan as a writer. So if you ever have a chance to get online and read some of Dylan's observation in the world of sports, whether it's Indiana basketball and football, Notre Dame, whatever, he covers all three, including Purdue, I believe, in basketball. So he is a very knowledgeable sports writer. very understanding of everything that's going on in the world of college sports. And like you said, he is an AP voter this year. And even when he had Indiana above some teams earlier in the year, he was taking a lot of heat on X, or what was formerly known as Twitter, and because of that. But he establishes a pretty good, firm argument when it comes to anything dealing with rankings and stuff. So it's good to get his feeling on that. Maybe we'll have him back here in maybe a couple of weeks to see everything about it. A couple things here. I'm trying to see here because he kind of got me. Oh, yeah, the Big Ten schedule this week, just to throw it up here real quick. Boilermakers at Michigan State this Friday night. That's on Fox, 8 p.m. And the Sparty's looking to continue to try to get back on track. Of course, we've got Indiana, Ohio State at noon, a part of Big Noon Kickoff on Fox, Wisconsin and Nebraska. That should be a dandy of a game. Nebraska, who just made a change at offensive coordinator, Dana Holgorsen, is now calling the plays as the offensive coordinator. And they had a heartbreaking loss at USC this past weekend, 28-20. And if you ask me, they kind of got screwed. I'll just leave it at that. USC, UCLA, big time rivalry game there. That's a 10:30 Eastern Pacific time, or 10:30 p.m. start Eastern time, excuse me. Illinois and Rutgers is another game that I think is going to be a dandy as well. Rutgers has gotten bowl eligible. First time that their school has been bowl eligible back to back. And Illinois has quietly had a pretty good season, a chance to go, I think, win 9, if not 10 games, which would be a heck of a feat for Brett Bielema and his staff. Iowa and Maryland, I question why Maryland has fallen off like they have. I know the quarterback makes a difference. It does. It makes a huge difference, but they've just kind of really fallen off. Northwestern plays the Wolverines, and then, of course, Penn State takes on Minnesota in another game that I think will be a dandy. And while Penn State, I'm sure, will be favored in that game, Minnesota right now has been playing some really good football. And for whatever reason, PJ Fleck has a knack of pulling off upsets at home. He has, and in that regard. But everything from that perspective will be interesting to see what all happens with some of that stuff. What I wanted to do here next is I want to play something that Sig had said when he first came into the Big Ten, and I'm going to try to get there to get it. Let's see here. I'm going to let this play, and it's a short clip, I think about 2 or 3 minutes, but this was his first appearance at Big Ten Media Days.
Good to be here. After 42 years of coaching, it's always good to be on the roster. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good to be here. After 42 years of coaching, it's always good to be on the roster. Stay on the roster. That's key to the drill. So, had a great summer. Want to thank my wife, Manette.
Oh, things never work when you need it to. And I probably should have checked it first. Let's see if I can get this to do what I want it to do.
Me to do what I love to do. Without her, this wouldn't be possible. We're a team. Would also like to thank Pam Witten and Scott Dolson for their tremendous commitment to making IU football relevant. And Tony Petiti, who I've gotten to know, for his leadership, vision, intelligence, and willingness to make tough decisions. The Big Ten Conference is a great preeminent league, has been for a long time. And the addition of the 4 West Coast teams puts us on an exciting new trajectory. So I've got a lot of respect for every school and coach in this league, and we're excited to get going. Now, I can tell you, normally at these things I stand up here and we're picked to win the league. It's just usually how it's been. I have been picked next to last twice, which we're picked 17th out of an 18-team league, and I get it. The 2 times we were picked next to last, in 2022 we won the conference championship, and in 2017 we inherited an 8-45 team and won 8 in a row and played JMU the last game of the year for the conference championship. Now, I'm not into making predictions. That's just a historical fact. Okay? So I know you guys have been waiting for me to say something crazy. That wasn't quite crazy. I think the other point I'd like to make, it was just 3 seasons ago that Indiana was a touchdown away from winning the Big Ten Conference. 3 seasons ago. Now, in this day and age, the internet society, I got to have it now. 3 seasons ago seems like 3 decades ago. And all of a sudden, Indiana's become like an impossible job, or they're irrelevant. So what I can tell you is, in this business, the margin for error is very slim. And even Indiana last season lost 5 one-score games. And I'm including Penn State, which was tied with 2.5 minutes to go. All right? Now, our staple, places I've coached, guy I learned from, we're pretty darn good at those one-score games. So, just saying. I like our team. We have a lot of experience on our team. We have a lot of guys that have played winning football.
I just wanted to kind of play that there. I know it wasn't professionally edited or something like that, but it's kind of interesting that he makes this prediction about being picked second to last twice, and the teams that were picked that way all played for a conference championship. Indiana's 1 game away from doing that in a historical way. So I just thought it was very interesting, in talking about 3 years ago being a touchdown away from being a Big Ten conference champion. The last year's debacles of 5 or 6 games by 7 points or less, and how that has translated into a team that believes that they can win no matter what. And you could say last year's team was a lot of wishing and hoping, and you can't win in the Big Ten wishing and hoping. You have to control your own destiny, and that's how you play each and every week and stack the days, as Sig likes to say, and be present where you are, and fast, physical, and relentless in all things that you do. So I know Sig is a gentleman that creates a lot of, I don't want to call it stirring the pot, but he does it pretty good by what he says and does. And I thought at the Big Ten Media Days, when he made that historical fact, is the way he liked to put it, I think everyone had that look like, who is this guy? So it's one of those things that Sig is who he is. Yeah, John, I know that he's very, very outspoken on how he believes his teams will do, and that's what that's why Indiana is who they are today. It starts with him, and there's no denying that he believes that, and it goes through the assistant coaches and onto the players, and that's where the guys from James Madison made a huge difference, bringing them along for that reason alone, understanding that, because winning is hard. And he talked about the difference between winning and losing. It's a thin margin, and he's absolutely correct. And, but that's the guy that is leading Indiana, and deservingly so, with that new 8 year contract extension and the money that went along with it, there's no question that he has earned every bit of that. So big thanks again tonight from Dylan Sinn. I believe cause Sig told me. I yeah, I can see that, John. I could absolutely see that. But thanks to Dylan Sinn from the Journal-Gazette joining me here tonight. And one thing I'm going to show you, if I can get her up here, and I think I can. Bear with me here as I try to get this rolling, and I think I will be able to. It's just a matter of getting it up. And I wanted to show you this. Let's see. Yep, here we go. This is on ESPN. This is what they call their college football predictor, which has all the different algorithms. You guys can get to it. Just type in Google college football playoff predictor. And you can go by every team if you want to see what may happen or not happen based upon this algorithm. Again, this is not human driven. This is, like I said, an algorithm. So like if I say, okay, let's take Indiana, and it's going to ask you what you think will happen these last two games. So, and this is relating to the college football playoffs. I said, okay, let's see if this is true and that's true. What will end up happening? They won't make the college or the Big Ten championship game. And it comes back that they will have not even a 97% chance to make the playoffs, even with a one-loss game to Ohio State, and they would still have a 61% chance of hosting a game. So that's a pretty interesting dynamic there when you think about it. And how they predicted it here is they would, I think they would look at it as hosting Georgia potentially, which was interesting, and playing perhaps Alabama in the second round is how that's looking at it, I guess. But the other thing that I did with this, because I think it's easy with a team like Notre Dame per se. Let's take Notre Dame, and let's say they beat Army. Army's undefeated, and they're in the top 15, I believe now. But they lose to the rival SC because it's at SC. So a two-loss Notre Dame has a very slim chance of making it into the college football playoffs, considering how would you feel about them against an Alabama or Georgia two-loss team. So they virtually have to win it all to be in the college football playoffs and how you look at it. So that is at ESPN. There's some other ones too if you want to play around with them. I find them interesting because you hear about the algorithm and what they may or may not do or think. And I think it's good to have that knowledge, even though it may not be a 100% thing that you can bet your life on or anything. But it does give you an idea that Indiana has a great shot of being in the college football playoffs. But if you ask Sig right now whether that's important or not, he'll tell you no. He said the most important thing right now is Ohio State. And he's absolutely right. Thursday, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk Ohio State A to Z and look at some film of the Buckeyes. Very good football team. I've had a chance to watch some all-22 film, which is basically taking the wide angle and then putting the end zone angle right behind it, where you get to really study a team A to Z. So I think in some respects, it's going to be a good film session that we can have with everything on that. Tim says this is all projection. PSU fan. If Minnesota would upset you guys, you think that you would be out. Again, you just never know with that. I don't look at Minnesota necessarily being a bad loss. even though they're not, I don't know if they're ranked or not, but Minnesota's a pretty darn good football team at home, and I think they've been on a pretty good run here of late. But Thursday, we're going to talk all about the Buckeyes and what it will take for Indiana to come away with the win in the shoe at Ohio State in front of 100,000 plus fans. So be with me here Thursday night, 7:30 once again. Thanks so much to Dylan Sinn for joining us today. I know he's got a lot on his plate at this time of year, and the fact that I told him it would be 10 to 15 minutes and we went about 45, I may have to buy him a Coke or something, or maybe even a special beverage down the road. But also, thank you guys for joining into the show again tonight. I appreciate your viewership as well as participating actively in the chat. Hope to see you back here on Thursday, 7:30. And for now, I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. You've been watching the Hoosier Football Tailgate right here on Believe.